Hi, welcome to the Apartment Rouge on the day of the Great Conjunction, which is the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, which, depending on which source that you read, hasn't happened in either 400 or 800 years. Since that's such a discrepancy, I'm assuming nobody really knows. They're calling it the Christmas star because supposedly that conjunction happened on the day Jesus was born. But of course, nobody knows that because nobody actually knows when Jesus was born. That's not a date we are given anywhere, whether in the Bible or any of the annals of history. No one knows when Jesus was born. So that's kind of ridiculous. But anyway, it is happening on the same date as the solstice, and I believe there is an eclipse today as well. So lots of astronomical things going on today. And it made me think of my childhood, which I've been doing a lot of anyway, well, not my childhood specifically, but just my life's journey, and trying to assess just how far along am I in my journey as far as healing and self-improvement from the things that I've been through in my life. Long story, not going to go into that here. And also, how much further do I need to go? Because let's face it, if you've been through traumatic things in your life, healing is a never-ending process. You never actually come to the end of it during your lifetime. It's something that you have to continually work at. But it is good every once in a while to look back and take stock of how far you have come and how far you have to go, so that by seeing the improvements, by seeing how far you have come in your healing journey, it can give you encouragement to continue, right? Oh, and by the way, my name is Sabne Raznik. This is the channel where I usually do what I call mini readings, which is usually just one poem, sometimes my work, sometimes that of others. And there is quite the library on here now. There is almost 100 videos. There might even be 100 now because I haven't counted them in a little while. And lately I have also been posting full poetry readings, not just mini readings, but also full poetry readings that I am involved in, whether they are my own readings or readings organized by the e-zine that I founded and edited, and Dave Sachs is my co-editor. We've been doing e-readings. I've been calling them e-readings because they're via Zoom. And I hope to continue that even when the rest of the world goes back to meeting in person, to continue to have a virtual platform for people to read, since it invites more poets to connect from places that they normally would not be able to come together and meet in person. Like it invites a wider variety of poets from different areas and a wider variety of voices from different cultures to meet in one place, since they can do it virtually, whereas they might not normally be able to get together in the same room, right? Just because of logistics and all that. So I'm hoping to be able to continue that to some degree, even after the new normal is established, after the pandemic passes. So those videos are also being put on this channel as the events happen. So you can go back through, and if you see something you like, by all means, enjoy it. And I encourage you to look up the original language, because some of these poems are in translation. After all, I'm trying to get a very good library of a worldwide range of poetry, because I just love world poetry myself. And so if you find a poem that you really like and you are able to read the original language that it comes from reasonably well, I encourage you to look it up in its original form, because as we know, translating a poem is a very tricky process, and a lot of things get lost in translation. So if you can read the original language that the poem is written in, so much the better. And if not, you can enjoy the English translations that I have shared. Excuse me, this whole thing is pretty much for educational purposes and to share the joy. And because I do share other people's poetry, not just my own, it's not monetized, so that I'm not breaking any copyright rules. I'm just sharing the joy, right? Well, in the spirit of sharing the joy of poetry and looking back through my personal life's journey and thinking about my childhood, and the reason why the Great Conjunction got me thinking about that is because it reminds me of the movie The Dark Crystal, from the Jim Henson movie from the 80s. I'm sure you remember it or have heard of it. Or maybe you don't remember the name of it, but you have heard something of it, right? And the reason why it reminds me of the Dark Crystal is because throughout that movie there is an emphasis on a certain great conjunction that is to happen during the movie, and that the Skeksis, the bad guys, need in order to get the life force that they need to continue, right? It's like a whole involved storyline. And so throughout the movie you'll hear references to the great conjunction, and it's always in this scratchy, dark kind of voice, because the people who generally say it in the movie are either the Skeksis, who are evil, or Agra, who is the kind of like the wise woman in the movie. She's been alive for like 1,000 years, so she has all this knowledge that the newer generations don't all have, because she's lived the longest, right? And so she understands what the Great Conjunction is, and she understands everything that's going on that the younger generations don't know, right? But because she is old, she also has that raspy kind of, the Great Conjunction kind of voice. And so every time somebody mentions the great conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter, that's what I've been hearing in my head. The Great Conjunction! Well, if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I mean. But that being a movie of my childhood, it got me thinking about other aspects of my childhood as well. And that made me think of The Raven. Because as a teenager, I was kind of like the goth teenager. I didn't go full in with the white facial makeup with the black eyeliner and the black lips and the black nails. But I did wear a lot of black for practical reasons as much as any other. But black is my favorite color. And so I was labeled the goth kid. I wasn't into vampires or werewolves, and I didn't do seances and stuff like that. So I guess in terms that are now used among young people, I would be more considered emo, maybe, than goth. But in the time, when I was a teenager in the 90s, there was goth, and that pretty much encapsulated anything that might be considered emo, because emo wasn't a thing, right? So I was considered the goth kid. And what I would do with my friends, one of the things we would do was sit in a circle, without candles though, because like I said, we wouldn't do seances or anything. So we would just sit in a circle in the living room where all the adults could see us, because it wasn't no big deal. And we would recite The Raven, each person taking a verse and reciting it. That was just something we used to do as teenagers, me and my friends. And well, it was mostly me that put them up to it, because I've always been the big poetry buff, right? And we would turn on the Smiths and listen to the Smiths, and you can find their music still today. How Soon Is Now, and I forget the name of the one about cemeteries, but it was something about visiting cemeteries, and sing me to sleep. Kind of like the epitome. The Smiths were the founders of the genre we now know as alternative, only they were also extremely emo before emo was a thing. Very dark and sometimes kind of suicidal music, to be honest. Very speaking to that hormonal stage you go through as teenagers, where you're just very confused, and frankly, my teenage years were not easy for me, so that music spoke to me. We would play the Smiths, and we would sit around in the circle and recite The Raven, which made me want to read The Raven on here, because I haven't done that yet. So I can't recite it anymore. My brain has not held on to that through my adult years since, so I have to read it. But it just brought those memories back, thinking about it. And it's funny how all that was triggered just by hearing people talk about the Great Conjunction. But it's a good thing to do every once in a while, to look back and take stock of where you were versus where you are and how far you've come. It can be encouraging. All right, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my book surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there, and nothing more." Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore!" Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady, perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance, it were, "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly. Discourse. Though its answer little... Okay, I'm just going to start that verse over. I'm sorry. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being has ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door, with such name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather then he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of nevermore." But the raven, still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I willed a cushioned seat in front of a bird. I read that wrong. But the raven still beguiling all my fancy into smiling, straight I willed a cushioned seat in front of bird, and bust, and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burnt into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. I'm getting tongue-tied. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore, quoth the raven. Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil, whether tempter sent or tempest tossed thee here at shore, desolate yet all undaunted on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore, quoth the raven. Nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still of bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked up starting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie that thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor, and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. I see now why I liked it so much. It spoke to that darkness that was in me when I was a teenager. And contrary to what people like to believe about Poe, it's not about ghostly or demonic things at all. And all that lovely alliteration, which is my favorite poetic device throughout. I don't need to point it out. I'm sure you heard it plenty. So, yeah. I can see why I liked it. But we used to have it memorized, all of us. And so it didn't matter where we ended up in the lineup when we sat in a circle, because we knew every verse. So whenever it was our turn, we knew the verse to come, right? We knew what we were supposed to say. But I don't have that in my head now, so I had to read it. I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope that you find other gems on this channel to enjoy, and that you share them with your friends and do further research with the various do further research about the various poets that you may find here, and maybe go down some very pleasant rabbit holes. Yeah. A site that I would like to recommend, especially if you are a big fan of world poetry, Poetry International. I don't know the exact web address right now, but you can just type that into your Google search and there it will be. It is a catalog of poetry from all around the world, and it usually has 4 or 5 poems from each poet, and you can actually look them up by the poet name or by their country of origin, right? And it will show you the original language poem next to an English translation. So I'm sure you will enjoy that. I first found the site in the early 2000s when I first got a computer that was internet enabled. It was one of the first things I found, actually. And it was at a different web address then, which is probably why I can't remember the web address now, because it has changed. And I vowed then that I was going to read every poem on it. And I started out systematically going through the countries trying to read every poem on the website. Well, they add to it constantly. And so here it is over 10 years later, and I still have not reached that goal. I've actually rather given it up. So I'm sure that you will find something there that you like as well. And not a lot, but a number of the poems that I have read on this channel, I have found on Poetry International. So look that up and you will enjoy that too. Thank you for joining me in my living room and taking these few minutes to enjoy something other than the unusual stress of this unusual year that is almost over, seeing as how it's December 21st, right? I thought it was interesting too, because I didn't realize until I was reading this poem that this poem is set in December. And seeing as how this is the shortest day of the year, well, I suppose that makes it even more appropriate that I read it today. I don't know if I'll be posting this tonight, however. It might go up tomorrow or the next day, but yeah, some interesting coincidences there. Anyway, I'll see you with the next poem, and I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.